Hello, my name is Michael, and in this session we will write together a small application that will show our times table as a table on the ClockworkPI, and then we'll have it highlight a particular column and row. This will allow us to see the programming techniques of nested loops, if statements, and do until. So let's kick off. As before, we start with new, which clears the memory, and then edit to open our text editor. So first we'll do a nested loop, which is for xi equals 1 to 10. Next, xi. Then inside there we do for yi equals 1 to 10. Next, yi. Now, we don't need those variables at the end of the next if it's obvious what it's going to be. And in this case, I think it is, so I'm going to remove those. Now, what this bit of code, these 4 lines are doing, is the outer loop is going to do this loop 10 times. And this loop will do the centre of here 10 times, times the number of times in the outer loop, so we'll do 100 times in total. Once with xi equaling 1 and yi equaling 1, and then xi equaling 2, xi equaling 1 and yi equaling 2, and so forth all the way through. So let's write a little bit of code in the middle here that will happen 100 times. First we want to know the answer that we're going to display, which is xi times yi. So a equals xi times yi. Then we're going to want m equals 0, and this is our mode. And to highlight a particular square, a particular cell, we're going to set that to 2, and that will highlight that cell. Next we're going to do a print, where we're going to print out that answer. Now, using print, we can specify the x and y location in pixels where we want that print to print out. So we want the x, which is across here, to be basically every 5 letters. Every 5 letters, and each letter is 5 pixels long. So we do x equals xi times 5 times 5. Now we can simplify that a little bit and do xi times 25. Our y is the number of pixels down, and each letter is 5 pixels in width and 10 pixels in height. So we can do xi times 10. Then we do our mode, close brackets, and then our answer. So let's run this. And there we have our times table, but it sort of goes off the side a little bit. Well, that's because we actually want it to be at 0, 0. So we're going to do 2 things. We are first going to make a new variable, which will be xp, our x pixel, and that will be xi minus 1 times 25. And we kind of want to do the same for the height, so it starts at the top. So we want to do yp, y pixel, equals yi minus 1 times 10. And now we can change these 2 variables down here to be the XP, and the YP. We run it. If you look at that top line, you can see sort of little bits of junk. And that's basically the text that was behind those letters before we wrote the letters that we wrote. So right at the beginning, we want to clear the screen. CLS to clear the screen. And there we have a nice clear 10 times table. So we now want to highlight a particular line. So first we want to take that input. So we do line, input, input, open string, x, colon, comma, $. So this takes in a string, and that string is not a number. So we need to turn that number, that $, into a number. Before I do that, I'm just going to do a print. So we do x equals val for value, and then the $, which is our string. Now we go down into here, let's use that new x value. What we're going to add is if x equals xi, then m equals 2. And if. The way an if statement works is it has the if statement and then a condition which will evaluate to either true or false. And if it's true, then the statements between the if statement and the end if will be executed. So on the cases where x equals xi, the mode will be set to mode 2. So let's run it. So we'll put it as 5. And now you can see that 5 column has been highlighted. But what happens if we don't enter a valid number? Say 100. Well, at the moment, it just runs. But we'll never highlight any column because 100 isn't a valid number. So what we want to do is we want to repeatedly ask the user until they enter a valid number. So we go right there to the top and we add the word while, and then 2 spaces on the front of each of these lines. This isn't technically needed, but it's a lot easier to read if you add them. Then loop until. And loop until, once again, needs a condition. And in this case, we want that condition to be when the x is greater than or equal to 1 and x is less than or equal to 10. So here we've chained 2 conditions together, and that and means both conditions must be true. So let's run it. So if I add a number that's below 1, I get asked again. Ask a number that's above 10, I get asked again. If I add a number that's in our range, our program runs. So that's brilliant. But we now need to do the same thing for y. Rather than rewriting it all, we are going to copy and paste. To copy and paste, in this editor, we press the F4 button once we get to the beginning of the bit that we want to copy and paste. And that will move us into the mark mode, which we'll specify down here in the corner. We can then use the arrow keys to select the words that we want to copy. So we're going to copy that whole loop. And then we press the F5 button to copy that into our clipboard. Then we press the F5 button again to paste it back out. But this time, everywhere that it currently says X, we want it to say Y. So, input Y, set the value of that string to y, and loop until the y is within the acceptable range. And then we go back down, and we want to highlight our y as well. So we want to say if the x equals xi, or the y equals yi, highlight that. Then we can run it. So we want to know 5, 3. Our 3 row is highlighted and our 5 column is highlighted. But it would be a little bit easier to see if we could see exactly which number crosses those two. So we want to unhighlight effectively that one. So we could make this if statement more complicated, but that has a problem with this editor anyway, in that our line length has a limit. So I'm just adding junk until we get to the end of the line. When we hit the end of the line is too long. So that won't work. What we'll need to do instead is add another if statement. So we'll go underneath our first if statement, we'll go if x equals xi, and rather than or, y equals yi, then we'll set that that mode, back to 0. And if. So we'll enter 2, 4, and now the row and the column are highlighted except that crossing point where they're both the same value. Cool, so there we have it, an example of writing nested for loops, if statements, and while until loops. Thank you very much. Have a great day.